Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I woke up with coffee in hand, sunshine through the window, then found an eviction notice on my doorstep from an HOA I never joined, signed by my unhinged ex. What followed wasn't a neighborly dispute. It was war, forgery, sabotage, and a fight to keep the life they tried to steal. I never thought I'd wake up in my own home, coffee in hand, sun shining through the window, and suddenly feel like I was being evicted from my life. That morning started like any other. My wife, Lena, was upstairs trying to get the kids to finish brushing their teeth before school, and I was in the kitchen flipping pancakes, half listening to a podcast about postmodernist architecture while ignoring the noise of sibling warfare, echoing from the second floor. I stepped outside to grab the mail, expecting the usual junk, coupons, maybe a flyer from that creepy piano tutor who always stares too long at Lena. Instead, tucked between a realtor's postcard and a property tax notice was a thick envelope labeled Official Notice of Community Violation, Maple Creek Preserve Homeowners Association. It looked serious. The kind of envelope that thinks it's important just because it wears bold fonts and unnecessary exclamation marks. Now, I bought this house precisely because it wasn't under any HOA. That was non-negotiable. I'd spent 6 months combing listings until I found this gem. 2 stories, lots of light, a fenced backyard for the dog, and most importantly, no neighborhood Karen measuring grass height with a ruler. My land sits just outside the master plan development to the east, and the boundaries were clear when I signed the paperwork, surveyed, notarized, and burned into memory like Holy Writ. I opened the letter and read, due to repeated and willful violations of HOA Guidelines 2.3, non-permitted vehicles, 4.1, unapproved landscaping, and 6.5, unauthorized business operations from residential zone, you are hereby instructed to vacate the premises by 10 o'clock a.m. On the date immediately following this notice, failure to comply will result in forcible action pursuant to HOA Bylaw 7.9 and recovery of costs incurred. Maple Creek Preserve Enforcement Committee. My first thought was that this was some kind of joke, maybe a prank by my friend Luke from college. He always did love pushing my buttons. But the letter had an official HOA letterhead, legal-style formatting, and a signature at the bottom that made my skin go cold. Karen Westmore Jensen, President. I stood in the driveway, stunned, holding the paper like it might explode. Karen Westmore. I hadn't heard that name in over 20 years, not since high school. And yet, the second I saw it, I heard her voice in my head. Sweet at first, then bitter, then screaming at 2 in the morning outside my dorm window in the rain. She used to sit on the curb in front of my house for hours when we were 17, convinced we were soulmates. After I broke up with her, she'd leave letters under my windshield wiper. My dad had to call her parents twice before she finally disappeared. Apparently, she hadn't disappeared far enough. I dropped the letter on the kitchen island and pulled out my property deed from the file cabinet. Lot 41. Not part of Maple Creek Preserve. Not even touching it. The plat map confirmed it. There was a greenbelt buffer between our neighborhood and the HOA's boundary. I even double-checked the online GIS portal from the county assessor. It matched. My home wasn't, and had never been, under any HOA. Still, I had to know what kind of circus this was, so I dialed the number at the bottom of the letter. It rang once, then twice. Maple Creek Preserve Homeowners Association, a woman's voice said, calm and familiar. This is Karen speaking. I nearly dropped the phone. Karen, it's Trevor. Trevor Brady. I got your letter? A pause. Then that same honey-slick tone I remembered from high school. Oh, Trevor. Well, I figured you might call. I'm not sure what kind of mix-up this is, I began. But I don't live in Maple Creek. Never have. My lot's not part of the HOA. Your bylaws don't apply to me. Her response was cool, measured, and terrifying in its certainty. Actually, Trevor, you're mistaken. The HOA board voted last quarter to extend jurisdiction to adjacent lots that benefit from proximity to shared community resources. Your lot was included. You're listed as Lot 41 now. I blinked. You can't just add someone's private property to an HOA. We followed the proper procedure. The vote passed. It's all in the updated charter. You should have received a notification. It's not our fault you didn't read your mail. There was something off in her voice, something too calm, too knowing. You don't have that kind of power, I said flatly. I'm not in your HOA, and you have no authority here. If this is some weird revenge." "Trevor," she cut me off. "This isn't personal. You broke the rules. You park your work truck in the driveway. Your lawn has non-native grasses. You work from home without a business license. We can't have exceptions. The community has standards." I stared at the wall, trying to process how this was real. "You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow," she continued. "I hope you'll do the right thing." And then she hung up. For a few seconds, I just stood there, phone to my ear, listening to the silence. A cold, creeping sensation crawled up my back. This wasn't some bored HOA president nitpicking a flower bed. This was Karen. The same Karen who once carved my name into her forearm with a compass. The same Karen who left dead roses in my locker for weeks. And now she was calling herself the president of a community that apparently thought it could vote my family out of our own home. I grabbed my keys, threw the letter into a manila folder with my deed and survey, and got in touch with Richard Calloway, my real estate attorney. While Lena wrangled the kids into the car for school drop-off, I explained everything. Richard was as calm and precise as ever, but even over the phone I could hear his eyebrows go up when I mentioned the Lot 41 reclassification. "Trevor," he said, "this is bad law and worse theater. But you're going to need to take this seriously. Send me everything. We're drafting a cease and desist, and I'll contact the HOA formally. Also, document everything from this point forward." So I did. I scanned the notice, saved my call log, transcribed the conversation from memory while it was still fresh, and backed it all up in the cloud. I even printed hard copies for good measure. Because as ridiculous as it all seemed, I knew something with Karen's name on it was never just a misunderstanding, and she had given me a deadline, 10 o'clock sharp. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of fear, more out of disbelief. I lay awake with my laptop open beside me, tabs stacked 3 deep. County GIS maps, Oregon HOA statutes, legal blogs, and archived meeting minutes from Maple Creek Preserve's website. I even pulled up my original closing documents to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Everything was there in black and white. My land was a separate parcel carved out decades before Maple Creek even existed. The HOA had no jurisdiction. No vote could change that. But just because something is illegal doesn't mean people won't try it anyway. At 7:30 the next morning, while I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, I heard an engine rumble outside. Then a metallic clank. Then another. I walked to the front window and felt my heart thud hard against my ribs. An evacuator had pulled into my driveway, not a flatbed, a full-on tow truck. Behind it, a contractor's pickup idled, 2 men standing by a white utility box on the side of my house. One was already unscrewing the panel to the electrical meter. The other was heading toward the water valve access hatch near the curb. Both wore high-visibility vests with Community Services Division printed on the back in fake-sounding serif font. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the folder with my deed, my phone, my GoPro, and bolted outside, pulling my jacket on as I walked. The front door slammed behind me just as I flipped on the GOPRO and clipped it to my chest. "Excuse me," I called, loud and steady. "Who authorized this?" One of the men, bearded, maybe early 50s, looked over with a sigh, like I was just another Thursday morning annoyance. "We're here on behalf of Maple Creek HOA," he said. "Order for utility disconnection and vehicle removal." "You've been served notice," I blinked. "I don't live in your HOA. My property isn't under your jurisdiction." The guy shrugged and went back to his wrench. "Take it up with the board." "You're trespassing," I said, stepping closer. "You touch that meter, I'm calling the cops." He looked at me again, less casual this time. "Buddy, we don't want trouble." "Good," I said. "Because you're about to get some." I pulled out my phone and dialed the non-emergency dispatch line I'd saved after talking to Richard. While it rang, I stepped back and filmed the entire scene. The tow truck's license plate, the contractor's logos, the partially unscrewed meter panel. I narrated every detail. One of the men cursed under his breath and backed away from the water valve. When the dispatcher picked up, I reported a possible illegal utility tampering and trespassing attempt. She took down my info and said a deputy would be dispatched shortly. 10 minutes later, a black and white county sheriff's SUV rolled up. Deputy Sanchez was in his mid-30s, looked more tired than irritated, and clearly wasn't expecting a property boundary drama before breakfast. But to his credit, he listened, reviewed my papers, and stayed professional. "So you're saying they have no right to be here?" "Exactly. My property isn't under HOA authority. I've got the deed, the county parcel map, even the boundary survey, and I've already filed a cease and desist through my attorney." He nodded, then turned to the workers. "Do you have a court order? Any documentation from the utility companies authorizing you to make adjustments here?" The bearded one pulled out a wrinkled folder and handed it over. Sanchez flipped through it for about 5 seconds before snapping it shut. "This is a community enforcement memo. It's not signed by a judge, and it doesn't grant you the right to disconnect services on private property outside HOA jurisdiction." "But the president said," one of them began. "I don't care what she said. If you so much as touch another screw on that panel, I'll book you both for trespassing and tampering with utility infrastructure." "Understood." They understood. The tow truck rumbled to life and reversed down the driveway. The contractors mumbled something about wasting their damn morning and got in their pickup, peeling off with a screech. Sanchez gave me a sympathetic look. "You've got all your ducks in a row. But if they come back, document everything. Cameras, logs, timestamps. This smells like a civil suit waiting to happen, already in progress," I said. After he left, I went back inside and sat at the kitchen table, breathing slow, shaky breaths. Lena was staring at me, eyes wide, coffee halfway to her lips. "They actually came," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "Like clockwork." An hour later, a courier arrived. Another envelope from Maple Creek Preserve, this time with a bold red stamp that read, "Final notice. Forcible reclamation imminent." Inside was a 2-page screed citing obscure HOA bylaws about noncompliance, annexation of non-conforming lots, and some kind of emergency enforcement clause. It was gibberish. Legal theater written in boldface and fear, but I noticed something new. At the top of the letter was a header, Lot 41, reassigned, a fake parcel ID. They were inventing identifiers now, attaching my home to a fictional designation. I sent it all to Richard. His reply was short, "We're escalating." That evening, just after dinner, I saw headlights sweep across the front lawn. A black SUV pulled up near the gate. I went outside, already recording. The door flew open, and there she was. Karen Westmore Jensen, 2 decades older but still unmistakable. Thin, severe, platinum blonde haircut like it had been etched with a ruler. She marched toward the gate, eyes burning. "You think you can humiliate me again?" she screamed. "You think this is over?" My voice was calm. "You're trespassing, Karen." "This is my neighborhood," she spat. "You don't belong here. You never did. You stole everything from me, Trevor, and now I'm taking it back." I stayed behind the fence. The camera watched everything. My fingers didn't tremble. "You need to leave before I call the sheriff again." She pointed at my house like she was casting a curse. "You have until morning. One way or another, you're leaving. Don't test me." Then she turned, got in the SUV, and peeled out, tires screaming against the gravel. I stood there for a long moment, the night wind pressing cold against my skin. Then I went inside, locked every door, and uploaded the footage to 3 separate backups, because now it was personal. The morning started with the illusion of calm. Lena took the kids to school in her car while I stayed behind, scanning the footage from the previous night for any signs that Karen or her cronies had come back. I'd slept only a few hours, too keyed up to rest, mind spinning with legal strategies, camera angles, and worst-case scenarios. My phone buzzed every few minutes, Richard sending updates, the private investigator I'd just hired confirming receipt of the HOA's corporate filings, even my contractor friend checking in about upgrading the perimeter lighting. At 10:23, my world tilted again. Lena called. She never calls while driving. She's a text-only kind of person behind the wheel. But this time, her voice was sharp, panicked, barely holding together. "Trevor," she said, "I almost crashed." I froze. "What happened?" "I went to brake for the stop sign on Highland and the pedal went soft. I slammed it to the floor. Nothing. Had to throw it into park to stop." "Trevor, the brakes are gone." I was already grabbing my keys and heading for the door. 10 minutes later, I was at the gas station where she'd safely coasted the car into a parking lot, white-knuckled and shaken, but unharmed. The kids were already at school. Thank God. But if they'd been in the car, if she'd been on the freeway, a tow truck from the insurance provider came quickly. The driver gave me a knowing look when I said brake failure and promised to haul it to the certified mechanic downtown. I followed in my truck, not speaking the whole way. 2 hours later, the mechanic called me into the service bay and pointed with a flashlight under the lifted chassis. "Rear brake line's been clean cut," he said. "Straight through. Not wear and tear. This is deliberate. The words didn't fully land at first. I just stared at the slit tubing and the little crescent-shaped knife marks in the rubber casing. My stomach churned with something deeper than anger. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't passive-aggressive harassment. This was a message. I photographed the damage from every angle. Then I called the sheriff's office and filed a formal criminal complaint, suspected sabotage with intent to harm. A deputy took my statement, asked routine questions, and noted the lack of exterior damage. No broken windows, no alarm triggers, nothing. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. They popped the hood, reached under, clipped the line, and walked away. But the camera at the gas station might have caught them. I made sure to request a copy of the footage and noted the timestamp Lena had called me. Back home, I walked the perimeter of my property with a new intensity. I installed 2 more motion-activated cameras, one near the garage, the other overlooking the street. Then I set up an automatic backup system that uploaded every clip to a cloud drive and my encrypted NAS. The kids wouldn't be walking to school alone for a while. Lena's phone got a security app that sent me a ping if she ever left the house without unlocking it with her fingerprint. And I installed a tracker in our mailbox, one of those tiny magnetic ones you slip inside the hinge bracket. Because whoever left the first HOA letter wasn't the mailman, and I wanted to know exactly when the next one arrived. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat at my desk and stared at the manila folder. It was getting thick now. Inside, 2 HOA letters, a cease and desist copy, a screenshot of my parcel map with GIS overlays, police reports, photos of the brake line, footage stills, timestamps, audio notes, and at the top of it all, a printout of that first phone call log with Karen's name circled. I had to know more. I called Richard and told him I wanted a private investigator on this full-time, not just for documentation, but to dig. I needed names. Who were the other members of the HOA board? Were they involved? What was the basis for this so-called vote to annex my land? I wanted background checks, property links, vendor records, and if Karen so much as sneezed in the wrong direction, I wanted it on film. Richard agreed and said he had someone in mind. Mason Ketter, a former state investigator turned independent operator who handled high-stakes property fraud and political dirty work. The kind of guy who knew how to follow a paper trail and make it stick in court. Meanwhile, Lena stayed quiet most of the evening, curled up on the couch with a blanket and the dog, staring at the TV without seeing it. She didn't say Karen, but I knew she was thinking it. Just before midnight, I checked the live camera feeds. One of them, the driveway cam, showed a brief flicker of movement. I rewound. A person in a dark hoodie had stepped onto the sidewalk near the water meter, paused, then backed away when the floodlight kicked on. Too far for a facial ID, but the silhouette looked familiar. I took a screen grab, added it to the folder, and labeled it Night Intrusion 1, Possible Recon. Then I went to bed, barely sleeping, replaying Lena's words in my mind. I had to throw it into park to stop. She could have died. And someone wanted that to happen. Mason Ketter showed up to our house looking like he'd just walked off the set of a courtroom thriller. Gray leather jacket, button-up shirt with creases too sharp to be accidental, and an expression that said he'd rather be punched than surprised. He didn't shake hands, just gave a nod and said, "You're Brady." Let's get to work. We sat in my kitchen, the blinds drawn tight. Lena made coffee she didn't drink and hovered near the hallway, eavesdropping without apologizing for it. Mason flipped open a binder he'd already started compiling. I was surprised how fast he moved, but then again, Richard said the guy only took 3 cases at a time. Mine had just become his main course. "I got your tax lot," he began, laying down a printed overlay of county GIS data, "your survey plat from when you bought the property, and the last 5 years of HOA filings with the Oregon Secretary of State. Want to guess what I found?" "I'm already furious," I said. "Hit me." He slid over a copy of a document titled Revised Articles of Association, Maple Creek Preserve, HOA. It was dated 3 months ago. "Notice anything strange?" he asked. I scanned it, and there it was. A new clause. Lots located within contiguous perimeter zones may be absorbed into the HOA boundary upon executive vote by the board. Right beneath it, a reference to a Lot 41, which did not exist in any county record. They made up a lot," I muttered. "Correct." Mason nodded. "They invented Lot 41, and guess what? The coordinates match your property's outline within 5 feet. It's sloppy. Amateurs using GIS overlays without knowing cadastral protocol. They voted to include me in their HOA without telling me. Oh, they did better than that. I pulled voting records. They claim it passed with unanimous resident support. Lena raised an eyebrow. Unanimous. Mason looked at her and gave the faintest smirk. Including people who moved out 5 years ago. Dead ones too. Literally, one of the signatures belongs to a guy who died in a kayaking accident in 2019. That was the moment it stopped being ridiculous and became criminal. Mason leaned back. You've got grounds for fraud, forgery, conspiracy to commit property seizure, and depending on how that break incident plays out, attempted homicide. And that's not even touching the wire fraud stuff. Did you know Karen's been emailing the city planning department under a fake legal firm alias? What? Redstone Title Law Group. Not real. She's been submitting rezoning proposals to have the HOA boundary legally recognized by the city, citing compliance with some outdated municipal code from 1998. She even attached a fabricated neighborhood poll. Same dead guy signed it, by the way. I stared at the table, struggling to absorb the speed and scope of it. Karen wasn't improvising. She'd planned this, months in advance, maybe longer. Mason continued. I also checked her personal background. You dated her, right? I hesitated. In high school. Briefly, yeah, well, she's been married and divorced twice since then. Name now's Karen Westmore Jensen. She legally changed it to keep the Westmore hyphenate. Known control issues, minor run-ins with previous neighborhood boards. Always drama, but this time she's leveraged the HOA presidency into a full-blown power complex. And you're the origin story. She blames me, I muttered, for everything. She's weaponizing it, Mason corrected, and she's recruited others. The HOA board is stacked with old acquaintances. 3 of them are former classmates of yours from the same yearbook. One of them even commented, #JusticeForKaren under a photo of your house on Facebook. I looked at Lena, who now sat with arms crossed, jaw tight. We're not safe here, are we? She asked quietly. Mason didn't answer that directly. Instead, he pulled out a portable hard drive. This has all the documents, including screen grabs of her social media, emails, city filings, and the updated HOA charter. Start your paper trail now. Your lawyer's going to need it. I took the drive. It felt heavier than it should. That night, I began building the file, capitalized in my mind. I scanned every deed, layered it over Mason's GIS overlays, created a point-by-point refutation of each HOA claim, and backed everything up 3 ways. Offline, cloud, encrypted vault. Then I received an email from the HOA's lawyer, or someone pretending to be. It came from an address ending in Redstone title, with an attached PDF labeled Final Eviction Enforcement Notice. The language was intense. You are hereby informed of your removal from the premises per Section 6B of the Emergency Reassignment. Protocol attached was a list of items I was allowed to take, as if I were a tenant in breach of lease. It even claimed third-party storage had been arranged for excess materials and non-conforming equipment. They were staging an eviction. For my own home. The email signature read, M. Jensen Esquire, Redstone Title Group, Karen, using her ex-husband's name, pretending to be a lawyer. I printed the email, circled it in red, and scanned it again. Then I picked up the phone and left a voicemail for Detective Morales, the county fraud unit lead. I'd worked with her once before during a community design grant application. This was no longer about harassment. It was a multi-pronged legal assault with fake entities, forged votes, stolen data, and attempted violence. A hostile takeover with lipstick and spreadsheets. Lena stood behind me, reading the document. She wants your life, she whispered. Not just the house. All of it. I didn't say anything, because I was starting to think she was right. It started just after sunrise. I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping bitter coffee and going over Mason's latest report when I heard the low, mechanical hum. At first, I thought it was garbage trucks. But then came the unmistakable beep, beep, beep of a large vehicle reversing. I walked to the front window and froze. A flatbed tow truck was idling at the curb in front of my house, hazard lights blinking. Behind it, a white panel van marked Property Compliance Unit, MCPHOA. 2 men in reflective vests were already walking toward my garage with clipboards. A third was messing with the electrical box mounted on the side of the house. It wasn't even 7 a.m. I opened the front door and shouted, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" One of them, young, buzz-cut, too clean to be real city personnel, looked up and said, "We're here to enforce Section 6 eviction compliance on behalf of the HOA." "You've got the wrong house," I barked, stepping out barefoot onto the driveway. "This is private property, and I am not in your HOA." He smirked. "You're on the revised annexation roll. We're authorized." "No, you're not." I pulled my phone and hit record. "Touch anything, and I'll have you charged with trespassing and attempted theft." The guy with the clipboard hesitated. "Look, we're just contractors. We were hired for removal and utility lockdown." Lena ran out behind me in slippers, her phone already dialing. "I'm calling the sheriff." The moment she said that, the man at the electrical box quietly dropped his tools and walked away like he hadn't just tried to cut our power. Within 30 seconds, they were retreating, slow, careful, pretending to check paperwork and mumbling legalese as they backed toward their vehicles. But before they left, the driver of the tow truck tossed a large yellow envelope onto our front lawn. Inside, a typed letter from Redstone Title Law Group, repeating the eviction threat and now listing service coordination fees of over $38,000 pending non-compliance. It even claimed we'd defaulted on community dues, retroactively assessed from annexation date. I added the envelope to the file. Mason arrived within the hour and collected photos of the van, the contractors, the letter, and even tire tread impressions. He ran a check on the van's plates, registered to a landscaping company 2 towns over, owned by one of Karen's cousins. At 9, the local sheriff finally arrived. I showed him the footage, documents, and deed. He was sympathetic, but hesitant. This whole HOA thing is muddy. Civil, mostly. But that attempted utility shutoff? That's different. "I'll open a report." Mason stepped in. "You should also look at this." He handed the deputy the forged eviction letter and a record of the fake lawyer's domain registration. The deputy read it twice. "We'll escalate to county fraud investigators." That night, Lena and I barely spoke. The kids knew something was wrong. My daughter asked if we were going to lose the house. I told her no, but the certainty in my voice was gone. At 2 in the morning, I was still at my desk, building timelines and cross-referencing documents, when an alert popped up on my screen. "Camera 4, backyard motion detected." I clicked it open and saw her, Karen, on our lawn. Just standing there, arms crossed, hair back, dressed like she was running a meeting, staring into the camera. Then she turned to leave, but not before mouthing something. I replayed the footage over and over until I made it out. "You never should have left me." By the time morning rolled around, I felt like I hadn't slept in days. I sat in the living room with my laptop open, Mason's hard drive plugged in, building a report for Morales from the county fraud unit. The image of Karen standing in the backyard mouthing that message was frozen on my second screen. I couldn't decide if it was arrogance or madness. Probably both. Around 9 a.m., Morales finally called back. She sounded tired but sharp, like someone used to dealing with bureaucratic fires. I laid it all out. The forged HOA expansion, the fake lawyer firm, the staged eviction, the stalking. I even emailed her the footage of Karen in the yard. There was a long silence on the line. "This is already a mess," Morales finally said. "But if what you're telling me checks out, it's not just civil. It's criminal on multiple levels. Will you take the case?" "I'm not promising anything yet, but I'm dispatching a fraud examiner to look at the documents firsthand. Keep everything organized, no gaps." "No problem. I've got a system now." I hung up and walked outside to clear my head. That's when I noticed something new. A small lawn sign had been planted near our mailbox. White background, bold black letters. HOA notice. Non-compliant residents. Under review. It had the Maple Creek Preserve logo printed at the bottom. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. I ripped the sign out of the ground and snapped it in half. My neighbor across the street, Diane, a retired nurse, watched me with a worried look. She walked over slowly. "She's done this before, you know," she said quietly. "Karen?" Diane nodded. "Last year, she harassed a widower 3 blocks down, said his house didn't fit the visual standard, tried to have his porch furniture confiscated. He moved out in 3 months. Did she ever pull stunts like this when the HOA started?" "It didn't used to be like this," Diane said. "Karen wasn't even on the board until 2 years ago. The old president moved to Florida, and she sort of inserted herself. Let me guess. Nobody stopped her. People tried, but she buried them in rules and proxies. She even changed the meeting times so only her friends could show up." I thanked Diane and went back inside. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. This wasn't personal, only because of me. Karen had made a game out of domination. I just happened to be her final boss. Later that afternoon, Mason called. "Check your email." I found something. It was a scanned form titled Petition for Rezoning Approval, Parcel 41, addressed to the City Planning Commission. Attached, a fake map that labeled my home as part of an integrated common area. Even worse, it had 6 forged signatures from neighboring homeowners, including Diane's name. "I just spoke to Diane this morning," I told Mason. "She didn't sign anything." "I didn't think so," he said. "But guess who notarized the form?" "Don't tell me." "Karen, using a fake stamp. We ran the number. It belongs to a notary who moved to Arizona in 2018. That was it. The line was crossed 10 times over. I scheduled an emergency meeting with my real estate attorney and Mason. We agreed. It was time to file a full civil and criminal complaint. We printed everything, over 300 pages of documents, screenshots, footage, email headers, maps, digital logs. We called it the Black Binder. As I walked out of the attorney's office that evening, I got another email from Redstone Title Law Group. This one was short. "Your failure to comply has been documented. The board will convene in 72 hours to vote on forced removal under Article 7C. Then 5 minutes later, I received a calendar invite, an actual calendar invite. Subject: Final HOA board vote, termination of Brady residency. Location: Maple Creek Community Center, Room B. Time: Friday, 8 a.m. I laughed. Then I nearly put my fist through the windshield. They were holding a fake tribunal, and they expected me to show up. The morning of the so-called tribunal felt like walking into a mock trial hosted by clowns who thought they were kings. I wasn't going to show up initially. My attorney had advised against it, but Mason disagreed. "Let her expose herself," he said. "These people are drunk on fake authority. If we're recording, it could be golden court." So I went, but not alone. I brought Mason, my attorney, and Diane, who insisted on tagging along after I showed her the forged petition with her signature. We also brought a body camera, 3 phones recording simultaneously, and a cloud storage link uploading everything in real time. Maple Creek Community Center was an oversized beige box that smelled like air freshener and mildew. Room B was a windowless hall with a cheap plastic banner that read "Annual Emergency Compliance Assembly" in bold Comic Sans. There were folding chairs in rows, a laminated podium, and a long table with 7 people seated behind it. In the center, wearing a pastel pink blazer and pearls, sat Karen. She looked up from her stack of papers as I entered. The room quieted. The performance was about to begin. "Mr. Brady," she said, not even pretending surprise. "We weren't sure you'd come." I walked to the podium but didn't speak. My attorney stood beside me, silent but firm. Mason sat in the back, phone raised. Karen cleared her throat. "As president of the Maple Creek HOA, I hereby open this emergency board session under Article 7C, violation of community harmony and sustained noncompliance." Someone at the table started scribbling notes, as if we were in a real courtroom. Karen continued, "The board will now review the documented infractions of Mr. Trevor Brady, resident of Parcel 41, which, under annexation rules, is now part of the Maple Creek jurisdiction." I spoke up then, voice calm. "You forged that annexation. You falsified documents, maps, signatures, even notarization. I have everything recorded, archived, and already submitted to county fraud investigators." Karen's jaw twitched. She glanced quickly at the others, most of whom looked like retired extras from a pharmaceutical commercial. Only 2 seemed to understand what was happening. One shifted uncomfortably. Another woman leaned over and whispered something to Karen. But Karen pushed forward. "Mr. Brady has been non-compliant with landscaping ordinances, has hosted unauthorized business activity. I work remotely, as an architect, in my home, on my land. That is not illegal, and has engaged in behavior unbecoming of a community member, including verbal threats, destruction of signage." "You mean the one illegally posted on my private property?" Karen's voice sharpened. "Under Article 3.2, we have the right to vote on forced removal. All in favor?" That's when Mason stood up, slow and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this entire meeting is being recorded and live-streamed to county investigators. Any attempt to enforce a false judgment today will be considered conspiracy and fraud." Someone near the back audibly gasped. Karen's eyes darted from face to face, her facade cracking. "You're bluffing," she said, but it came out like a hiss. I pulled out a hard copy of our compiled black binder and dropped it onto the podium. This includes notarized statements, surveillance footage, IP logs, and a full breakdown of your scheme, Karen, including the rezoning petition with 6 forged names. Diane's among them. Diane stood. "I never signed a damn thing. That was it." 2 members of the board stood up and walked out. Another mumbled something about needing to rethink participation. The rest sat in stunned silence. Karen stayed frozen. Her lips were tight, hands gripping the edges of her folder as if they were the only things holding her to the floor. "We're done here," my attorney said. "Expect to hear from the district attorney." We walked out in silence. By the time we reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was Morales. Her voice was sharp, fast, excited. "We just received a full dump of your documentation. Our office is opening a formal investigation. We've issued a subpoena for all Maple Creek HOA records. This is moving fast." I finally smiled for the first time in weeks, and then I saw it. Back at my house, parked across the street, was a silver SUV. Karen was sitting inside, watching us return, still clinging to the fantasy. The silver SUV was gone by nightfall. I watched it drive off from my upstairs window, her silhouette stiff behind the wheel like someone who just realized the ground beneath her was cracking. But I knew better than to celebrate early. Narcissists like Karen didn't fold quietly. They exploded, burned, dragged others down with them if they could. I triple-checked every lock, turned on every camera, and kept my phone next to my pillow. 2 days later, the fire marshal showed up at my door. Apparently, an anonymous tip had come in reporting improper chemical storage and suspicious odors on my property. The man was polite but firm. He had to inspect. I walked him around every inch of my home, garage, and backyard. Clean, legal, documented. I asked who filed the report. He smiled. Anonymous. But his tone said, "You know exactly who." That was her final move. A coward's Hail Mary. But it didn't work, because the next morning everything changed. At 6:12 a.m., I was sipping coffee in the kitchen when my phone lit up. News alert, Channel 9, HOA president arrested in fraud and stalking investigation. I opened the link and hit play. There she was, Karen Westmore Jensen, being led out of her home in handcuffs. Her hair was perfectly styled, like she thought she could outcharm a warrant. Behind her, officers carried out boxes of files, computers, what looked like a massive home printer. The reporter's voiceover filled in the rest. Karen Jensen, president of the Maple Creek Preserve Homeowners Association, was arrested early this morning following a wide-ranging investigation into fraudulent land annexation, falsification of legal documents, harassment, stalking, and attempted sabotage. Authorities say the charges stem from a targeted campaign against a local resident whose property was never legally part of the HOA. Sources say Jensen allegedly manipulated zoning records, forged signatures, and even organized a tribunal to expel the resident from his own home. It felt surreal, not triumphant, just quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a long storm when your ears are still ringing from thunder, even though the sky is blue. My lawyer called not long after. "She's going to face at least 5 federal charges," he said. The wiretapping alone carries prison time. The attempted vehicular sabotage could stick too. And the HOA being dismantled. Counties dissolving the board. Half the members are cooperating to avoid charges. They're handing over everything. Later that week, I stood in front of a courtroom while Karen's defense attorney tried to paint her as a misunderstood community leader. I sat through it all. The shaky voice, the fake tears, the laughable claims that I had provoked her by ignoring community spirit. But then came our turn. Mason presented the footage. Diane testified. My lawyer detailed every forged map, every fraudulent filing. We even brought in a zoning clerk from the city who confirmed that Karen had altered scanned documents with amateur-level Photoshop. The jury didn't need long. Guilty on all counts. Karen Jensen was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, stripped of any authority to serve on any civic body, HOA or otherwise. Her face was all over the news that night. Headlines like, "HOA horror, ex-girlfriend tries to steal man's house, ends up in prison." But I didn't watch the coverage. Instead, I threw a block party. We grilled ribs, played music, and let the kids spray paint the broken sign that once said, "HOA notice non-compliant residents." One of them added horns and a mustache to Karen's face on an old flyer someone brought. It was therapeutic. At the end of the night, I put up a brand new sign at the edge of my property. Private property. No trespassing. Not now. Not ever. Especially you, Karen. And just below it, mounted on the post, was a little camera, always watching, just in case another ghost from the past decided to come knocking.